Good morning, everybody. Lee Brower here. Welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. I am so grateful to be here, so glad to be here. You just don't know. What about Bob? We'll talk about that in a minute. How many of you read the book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield? If you have, you'll know that he talks about a concept called resistance. And resistance is that moment that comes on what I call the second nudge. He calls it something different, but he says, you first get inspired or motivated. You may see somebody needs help and you say, well, I'm going to help them. And then I'm going to get it tomorrow and do this, but then the second nudge comes along. And the second nudge almost immediately comes after the initial impulse. And it's an opposing force. It might be doubt, fear, rationalization, procrastination, or some form of internal resistance that tries to prevent you from acting on your own your first nudge, your first inspiration. Well, I combined this. So that's an experience after reading this and after thinking about it a lot. I had an experience where I listened to a speaker, and he said that over the last 2 or 3 years that he had been trying every morning to ask himself the question, can I be the answer to somebody's prayer today? And I thought, what a great question. What a great question to put into your mind every morning. Not to go looking for it, but to let your subconscious mind look for it so that you don't walk by it. And oftentimes it's the nudge that you would walk by. So what's happened is when you ask that question, you're going to get more first nudges than you would ever get otherwise. You're going to see people that you wouldn't normally see. You're going to think of things you wouldn't normally think of. You'll go out of your way. You might just smile at somebody. That's the first nudge, and it makes a difference. Or you might see somebody that needs help, and you say, I'm going to go help them, but then you don't. And that's the exact thing that happened to me one time. I think I've told you about it before, where I had asked that question in the morning, and I was thinking about it as I was landing a plane, and I was landing in Chicago, and I thought, I already predetermined where my nudge was going to come from. I didn't let it come to me. I had already predetermined it. And so I said, when I walk by that saxophone player all the time, I always ignore him, but this time I'm going to see him, and I'm going to acknowledge him. I tried to fake a nudge. And as I was going through the airport, I passed by somebody that I got a nudge on that said, help her. She was pushing 2 suitcases and carrying 2 suitcases, and she was just struggling. But I ignored the first nudge because I was going to my made-up nudge. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a second. I got a nudge. I turned around, and doggone it if somebody else hadn't stepped in there. Well, recently I had a chance, there's been several times, I call them intersections in life. When you come to that intersection and you get a nudge, you can go left, you can go right, follow the first nudge. So I've got lots of stories now about that. Let me just tell you one that just happened. Lori and I spent the last week in Alaska. And what a great time we had. A lot of arrows in, experiencing things and being able to appreciate things. And it was just wonderful. The last evening that we were on the ship, and then we got off and did some other excursions. With the last night we were on the ship, when we got off the ship, we were 2 days in Anchorage. And Lori got a really bad cold, and she, after dinner, went back to the room, and I said, I'm going for a hike. So off I went down by the river and kind of got lost. I was coming back up, and as I was getting ready to cross an intersection, and it was busy, but there's no stoplights, I happened to notice somebody, just a man, just looking at a piece of paper, looking somewhat confused. I got a nudge. And so I walked across the street and walked right by. And the second nudge kept saying, oh, you've been gone too long. What's Lori's going to worry about you? Where you at? All the rationalization came back, and I stopped myself and said, no, I got the first nudge. I walked back to him and said, you need help? And he goes, oh, yes. I have reservations at this restaurant. Would you be willing to help me? And I said, well, let me find out where it is. And so I Googled it, and I said, well, it's about 4 blocks from here. And he looked a little befuddled, and he was elderly, very nicely dressed. And I said, well, here, let me help you. So I started walking with him. I found out he's from Michigan, that he's all by himself, just decided to take this trip. I don't know any more of the backstory. I can make all kinds of guesses. But anyway, walked with him to the restaurant. As we were approaching the restaurant, I couldn't help it. The coach in me came out. And this is where Lori gets frustrated with me. She'll tap me on the shoulder. But I said to him, how old are you? Can I ask how old you are? And he goes, yeah, I'm 83. I said, 83? You're a young 83. And he goes, well, sort of, kind of, I'm getting that. I said, no, stop right there. All right, so you're 83. Let's assume, now let me ask you this next question. How long are you going to live? This is straight from Strategic Coach, okay? How long are you going to live? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, how long are you going to live? how much longer? He says, well, what? Oh, no, I said, what age are you going to die? That's what I said. What age are you going to die? And he goes, well, I don't know. I'm not, so I rationalized. I said, what age are you going to die? He said, 93. I said, oh, perfect. Let's assume you're 92. How do you see yourself physically? And he says, well, probably about as good as I am now. And he was a short, little, slight fellow, properly dressed, He was probably about, And I said, okay, good. So physically, okay, yeah. And how do you see yourself mentally? He says, well, pretty sharp. Okay, and do you have friends? Oh, I got a strong family. I got a really strong family. I said, oh, great. So you got a good family around you. So if you're all of that at 92, let's say you're 1 year before you leave the planet, you're all of that at 92, what's the likelihood that you're going to leave at 93? And he looks at me and he grins and he goes, well, I guess I might stick around for a while. I said, so how much longer would you live if you were all of that at 92? And he thought about it for a while and he goes, 98. I said, all right, 98 it is. So do you shift that? You shift your mindset now. And it was just getting ready to leave. We got him up to the restaurant. And he turned around and looked at me and he smiled and he said, this is the best day of my life. You just gave me 5 more years. Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm so grateful that I didn't ignore the first nudge, because you never know. So I challenge you, and I challenge you to help me to remember to ask that question often, and then just let it flow. Don't try to prejudge it, just let it flow and see where it takes you. Can I be the answer to somebody's prayer today? Let's have a meaningful week. Live life deliberately. We'll talk next week. Bye-bye.